Good evening and welcome to African Voices TV. My name is Chiwechi Hannah, coming to you through Sheffield Live TV. Sheffield City Council recently implemented a Race Equality Commission calling for evidence on racial disparities in the city to be submitted by the 18th of September. The concept was initiated by Councillor Abtisam Mohamed. I'll be speaking to her tonight, but first I'd like to introduce my co-host, Bailo Jallo. Good evening, Bailo.
Hi, Chiwe. Good evening.
Good evening. So we've got a Race Equality Commission in Sheffield. Any thoughts on that before we bring in the guest?
Well, indeed, it is a very vital one that is kind of, I would say, needed in the city, not only in this city, but across England. So hopefully we'll hear more from Councillor Abtisam Mohamed. And let me leave it at that for the minute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bailo. Good evening, Councillor Abtisam Mohamed, and thanks for joining us on African Voices platform.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lovely. Councillor Abtisam, what was the initial reason for you establishing the Race Equality Commission for Sheffield City Council?
Okay, so right at the, we were talking, I think, April, May time when there was a demonstration in Sheffield in June, actually towards the end of May and June. There was a demonstration in Sheffield in relation to Black Lives Matters. And this was as a result of what happened in America with George Floyd. We started discussions with the organisers of the demonstration, with community representatives, to look at different ways in which we could address racial disparities in Sheffield. And there were some initial discussions about possible statues or memorials, and very, very quickly those were scrapped. And we decided that that was very superficial and very short-termist in terms of trying to address racial inequality in the city. So we knew then that we had to look at something much more strategic across the city, looking at where we are, what we've done as a city so far, and what needed to be done going forward. So we got the idea for the commission based on a fairness commission that happened in Sheffield. So it runs like a parliamentary inquiry where we look at the various institutions, the big institutions in Sheffield, so the council, the health, police, the universities, schools, all of the different big institutions that we have in Sheffield. We intend to explore what they have done in relation to addressing racism and race equality in the city, and what needs to be done going forward. So that was how the idea was initially instigated. We then took this to community, so we had several community meetings where the terms of reference was discussed with community members to ensure that we took them, or they agreed to the scope of the commission, the different themes that the commission would be looking at. So that was all agreed, hopefully, by community organisations and community individuals.
Right. So you are still currently recruiting for commissioners. What's the process of recruiting commissioners, and who is leading on this particular commission?
So the process for recruiting commissioners is that we have put out an expression of interest, and I think that expires on the 1st of September. We are looking for individuals who will bring expertise to the table in terms of understanding race inequality and what needs to be done to address this. We have asked for, we are looking for a range of different types of representation. So young people, people that represent the voluntary sector, people that perhaps come from the independent sector, so people that perhaps work in the creative industry, sports industry, those different areas. So we want a wide range of people on there. It'll be myself and the chair, so Kevin Hilton, that will look at the expressions of interest when they come in. We'll be looking at what is needed for the commission in terms of the different themes and how they will be explored, because we want to make sure that we've got the right people that will do the issue justice as well.
Okay, so thanks a lot for that. So Kelvin Hilton's appointment. Kevin Hilton. His appointment, how was that? Because I understand he's not Sheffield based, and I think that's quite important, I suppose. Does that reflect the process as well? When you talk about all the categories of people that you're looking at getting on board for the commissioners, are they all going to be from outside of Sheffield?
No, not at all. So we want the commissioners to all be from Sheffield. The reason why we selected a chair from outside of Sheffield, and we invited a number of different individuals for discussions in relation to the commission, was because we wanted, the chair is the most crucial role in terms of the commission. They're the ones that decide the direction in which the commission is going, who will be brought in for evidence, and they will also steer the commissioners as well. And it was really important that we had somebody that wasn't linked to an institution in Sheffield, because we thought, well, I strongly believe that that could actually question the objectivity of the individual as well. So if you have somebody from the University of Sheffield, would they question the University of Sheffield if that is their employer? And the same could be applied across any different organisation in Sheffield. So we thought actually for the chair's position, it would be best if we had somebody who was objective, who had no links or ties to the organisations in Sheffield, and would be able to offer a stronger position in terms of the different themes that needed to be explored.
Okay.
For the commissioners, we are looking for individuals from Sheffield.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I bring my colleague in, a bit more about the commissioners themselves, because I'm really intrigued. I'm curious about what their function will look like. So they operate like a parliamentary select committee. Mm-hmm. So we've got submissions submitted, and we've got this period between the submission date, which is in September. I believe it's 21st September or somewhere there. Mm-hmm. And next year, 2021 September. What is the commission doing at that point, during that period?
In between the evidence comes. Okay.
What do they do with the evidence, and what are they?
Okay, so it's important to note then, so that the commission initial call for evidence is the deadline is, I think it's the 18th of September. So that's the initial deadline. There will be further calls for evidence going forward across the year, and this will be based on different themes. We will also ensure that some people might want to give evidence but wouldn't be able to complete a form and wouldn't know how to access the information that we've put on the website. So what we want to do as well is across the year, based on the different themes that we're exploring, also go out to communities and talk to individual groups or organise meetings with groups in communities as well, to ensure that we can have as wide a range as possible to hear people's voice and to give people different opportunities to have their voice heard as well.
Okay, thank you. Balo, would you take it from there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Abtisam, for giving us your time this afternoon. You mentioned at the beginning that you've met various communities across the city, and your first movement was to kind of like consult those communities so that they can get involved. So what would you say has been the response from the community when you met them?
I would say initially there was a lot of apprehension, which is understandable, and I get this, because you know I've worked in the voluntary sector and in communities for over 17 years before I became a councillor, and there was a lot of apprehension that we've been here before, and there was a lot of cynicism in terms of, will this make a difference? Will it change anything? And you know, the discussion that we've had with individuals is, look, actually there is a momentum now with wanting to do something different, and we have the ear of many organisations and many institutions in Sheffield, when perhaps in the past, when I've been involved in similar not commissions, I don't think we've ever done a race equality commission before in Sheffield, we never have, but we've been involved in different groups that are trying to address racism or race inequality in Sheffield. And when I used to be the chair of the Sheffield BME network, we used to have lots of meetings with different institutions, and the response was very difficult then. Nobody was wanting to engage. Whereas I think now we have the ear of many institutions who are wanting to engage, and when we sent a letter out, Julie Doe, the leader of the council, sent a letter out to all of the key institutions in Sheffield, and all of them have endorsed the commission and said that they will work with the commission to ensure that whatever recommendations are made are followed through. So I think, you know, I fully understand the reservations that communities may feel, and I feel that this is from experience. This is from a long history of experience of never seeing things change, or when there is change, it happens at such a slow pace that it becomes almost meaningless, the change.
Yeah, speaking of that though, as you mentioned that you do understand yourself having been in the situation before, criticism is something that is kind of understandable if it is constructive criticism. In terms of what you've just said right now, looking at that, do you think in terms of those people who were kind of critical of, if I will say, getting involved, now they are fully on board and they do understand the steps that you are taking and how you are planning to take them?
I would hope so. I think there will always be reservations from individuals, and I think we have to take this on board. There will always be questions from communities, and again, I have to take this on board as well. I think the only reassurance that I can give people is this is coming from a place of we want to try and change how things are operating. And we've got two options. We can either do nothing or do try and address the situation that we're in. And I think the second option for me is the option that I would want to see all people try and sort of engage with, because really, I think for a long time now, we have been going round and round in circles. So to individuals who may question the process or may be difficult with the process, I've always said to them from the start, and there has been difficult individuals that I've engaged with right from the start, is we're doing this not for one individual. It's not about me, and it's not about a specific person. It's not about Kevin. It's not about Julie Dorr. This is about a collective. This is how we change things for individuals across Sheffield who may not have a voice, who may not be able to attend meetings, but still face that day-to-day discrimination. This is about making sure that we can do as much as we can to change the system for all BME communities.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Abtisam. That's handy to hear. So you've got two approaches to receiving submissions. You've got the community, people as individuals, and organizations as well, making submissions in their own. Is this just going into one pot, or is there a targeted way of approaching organizations for this? And what are you expecting from organizations apart from evidence of good practice?
It's all going into one particular area. It will be then broken down into different themes. So if somebody has experience or evidence that they want to give in relation to crime and justice, that will be put in the crime and justice area. If somebody has it in relation to health, that will be put in the health theme as well. So it will be put into the different themes that we're looking at, so that when we speak to the different institutions, we've already seen the evidence that community individuals or organisations have submitted, to be able to put some context behind the evidence that the institutions may give us.
Right, thank you. In your opinion, Abtisam, what do you think has made any similar attempts in the past fail? What will you be doing differently with this inquiry?
So the only similar thing that we've had in Sheffield is the Fairness Commission. Yeah. And the Fairness Commission was very big. It looked at poverty in Sheffield and how we try and address poverty. Race for me and racism, I think, is very different to poverty, because I think there are many things that institutions can do but don't do, that can change things for their employees or for their service users. So, if we're talking about, let's just use education as an example. So if we're talking about schools, we know that there's a number of different issues in relation to schools, whether it's the curriculum that's being taught, whether it's the diversity of staff, there's a lack of diversity there, and whether there's a diversity in terms of the senior leadership. And you can say this across the board, whether it's schools, universities. So there's different actions that the institutions can make, but haven't actually been supported to do this, or even pushed into a corner to say, well, what are you doing to think about these different areas? What are you doing to teach anti-racism? What are you doing to make sure that you do have more diversity in your workforce? So, asking the institutions from now to think about this, because this comes under my cabinet area. So I'm the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, and I've already said to the schools and to the different organisations that represent schools, you will be called in for evidence and you will be asked these questions. So from now, I want you to think about, well, what are you going to do for the curriculum next year? How are you going to incorporate diversity and anti-racism into the curriculum at primary and secondary schools? How are you going to teach British Black history effectively in primary and secondary schools? I want to know this in advance so that when you come to the Commission, you have some answers about what you're going to do. And then really it's up to the Commission afterwards to say, well, what are we going to do every year to make sure that we follow up on this, to make sure that the schools don't just allow this to come off the agenda, that it becomes an annual discussion to say, well, what did you do last year? How did you address those points, and what are you going to do next year to continue to build on these areas? And some of them will be long-term. So, for example, diversity in workforce is not a short-term issue, because we actually know it's a problem at university where BAME students are not staying at university. So there's a big retention issue there. So if we know that we're not getting enough teachers from different backgrounds, we need to step back. So we need to take a step back right from university and perhaps careers at college to say, well, what are we doing to encourage more students from Black and ethnic minority communities to choose this as a career, and what support are the institutions giving those individuals to ensure that they complete and get jobs in our schools in Sheffield as well. So something like that, I think, would probably be 3 to 5 years to take, or even longer actually, because going through university and getting the jobs is a much longer process. But something like this, I think, is just as important. So nobody can use as an excuse, oh, well, we're not getting the students through the door, they're not coming for interviews. It's not good enough, employers saying we choose the right person for the job. We need to do as much as we can to ensure that there is diversity across the board, but also diversity and progression as well, so that our head teachers are more reflective, deputy heads, assistant heads in universities, the senior lecturers, the professors. That's where we need our diversity, so that nobody sees a glass ceiling. And where there are glass ceilings, we've got to try and break them.
Right.
Speaking of glass ceiling, and yourself as the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, and also coming from an ethnic minority background and looking at your experience from the previous sector to where you are now as a councillor and having that post that is very influential. Because most of the time, as a Black person or as an ethnic minority, we are always shown that one person that is on the top. Then you are told, yes, you can be like that person. But then the ladder that was used for that person to climb and get to that place, that ladder has been removed. So yourself right now, in terms of the post that you are having, how are you going to make sure this inquiry that is going on right now, in terms of those barriers that you spoke about earlier, especially at your previous sector, that those barriers are tackled, and that this inquiry that you are doing will not just be something that at the end of the day will just be brushed underneath the carpet?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of important things there. So I think the first one is how we take people with us on a journey. And I think everything that I've done in becoming a councillor first initially, and then sort of being appointed to cabinet, I've tried to take people with me on that journey. And whether that's work experience students who contact me, because one of the things that I recognise that our communities have as an issue is a lack of contacts of people that they can say, well, I know this person here, can you do support them in getting work experience? And to be honest with you, I've never had so many students shadow me for work experience, but every year I will try and take 4 or 5 students from different backgrounds, from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, to come and shadow me so they can see what politics looks like. And also because I'm in my day job, I'm a solicitor. If they want to come and shadow me in the office, I offer that as well. Because I see that I didn't get this. I didn't get any opportunities to shadow anybody. And it comes back down to the sort of the rhetoric that everybody uses, where you've got to kill yourself to get to these positions. And you literally do. I had to work 40, 50-hour weeks just to have my face seen. And other people who are perhaps don't need to exert so much effort, they get promoted very quickly. So I will do everything I can to take students with me and to take other colleagues with me from different backgrounds on this journey. But I also want to make sure that community voice is heard as well, because, you know, when I was in the sector, the voluntary sector, I constantly kept shouting about how, you know, it was always the loud speaking individuals who had their voice heard. So it was always the community, so-called community leaders that would be at meetings, and actually the people that were doing the real work and just killing themselves in communities were never really seen in meetings, because they didn't have the time to send people, or they didn't have the capacity because they were always working. So I like to think that I would ensure that the grassroots voice is always captured throughout this and is never lost on that journey. Because for me, it's those voices that are more important than the one voice who just speaks really loudly all the time.
And just on that as well, in terms of the communities, as you will know, Sheffield is a very, very diverse city where we've got the African Caribbean community, the African community, the Yemeni community, the Asian, you name them. So in terms of this inquiry, how are you going to make sure this inquiry reflects everybody?
I think it's important that we ensure diversity in the commissioners. And I think that will have to be a conscious effort to make sure that we have different representation there. We can't have all the representations because we do have many, many communities in Sheffield. So, but I think ensuring that we have diversity and recognising that there are different communities is essential. And then when we hear evidence, whether we go out to communities, we can work with the voluntary sector to engage with different communities and community groups that they work with to hear their voices as well. So I think diversity at the commission level is important, but the diversity in the voices that are sharing their experiences is more important.
Thanks, Abtisam. So I think I agree that the diversity element is going to be crucial to this. So the commissioners will definitely be the ones making recommendations. At the end of this, they'll be making some recommendations and probably holding organizations to account. So when we talk about diversity, we also have a problem sometimes, as we have seen at the beginning of the year when the government tried to appoint Munira Mirza as part of the Race Equality Commission that they were setting up. And unfortunately, this is somebody who was more in denial about racial inequalities. So you have started this commission of inquiry on the basis that we acknowledge that there are racial disparities in Sheffield. How then do you ensure the credibility of the people that you're appointing to the panel?
Well, I think this comes down to, so it's a really important point, and it's why I'm involved in the selection process as well, because a lot of who we talk to, when we receive the applications, a lot of the individuals that probably would submit will be known individuals, will be people that we know from their work in the sector. And it will have to be a case of, you know, we look at the evidence that's submitted in terms of the application forms when they come in, and we select based on people's contribution, that they'll be the expertise that they can bring forward. So I think because I think Kevin comes from an objective position of not really knowing people in Sheffield. I'm quite fortunate that I've been in the sector for a long time, and probably know a lot of the individuals. I think one of the things that we want to avoid is having individuals on there that would deny that there's a problem in Sheffield and deny that there's any specific issue in any of the institutions. You know, I think that, you know, that we have made some movement, and I think that could be said nationally as well, that there has been some progression from perhaps the 70s and 80s, but there'll be lots of people that say, well, actually we've taken a lot of steps backwards as well. And we've taken a step backwards as a result of the undertones that come in political discussions, whether that's nationally and whether the discussions that resulted in Brexit and all of the big discussions that happen nationally has resulted in racial undertones being allowed to resurface. So we want to ensure that the commissioners are individuals that would recognise this as well, and not deny that there's a problem there. And I think the chair is very good. He comes from a background of working in this sector. He's written many journals and books in terms of race equality and how it should be addressed. And he because his specific expertise is in relation to sports, and he sits on the national FA, advising nationally on racism in football as well. So I think because he comes from a position of knowing there is a problem and something needs to be done, I would hope that the chair would be able to steer the conversation going forward as well.
Can I then get some clarity on how many people are actually scrutinizing the applications then, apart from you and the chair? Who else is sitting behind this desk of scrutiny?
We will probably be looking at another elected member to join, so there'll probably be 3 of us in total, but it will just be us that will be scrutinising those applications. Very similar to a job process when individuals come for jobs. I mean, in all fairness, we're doing something very different to the Fairness Commission, because the Fairness Commission, I was appointed. There was no election process for the Fairness Commission. So there was no application process. I was asked to join. And I think other people were asked to join as well. Whereas I think with this, because we want to ensure that there's a process and people to feel that they have an opportunity to sit on there as well, we want to make sure that we put the call out for individuals to apply.
I just wanted a clarity as well, whilst we're on that as well. In terms of the community, yes, as much as we want BEMA communities to be very, very involved in what is happening, is the wider white population as well very involved in this? Because as you will know, there are some of them that are really, really working hard with BEMA communities in order to tackle racism. And there are also some others who are in very high sectors that are in denial or that are part of the problem. So are they all involved to make sure we get a better inquiry here?
Well, as I said right at the start, we want to make sure that we have diversity there. So diversity is not about selecting specific communities, but encouraging as much individuals as possible to apply. And when we look at the applications that come, we will be looking to see who can contribute to the Commission in terms of the skills and expertise that they have. And so they can come from a range of different backgrounds. That's not to say that a specific individual from a white background might not be favoured because of another individual from a black background being able to contribute. You know, I think we've got to look at the range of individuals that would apply. And yes, there are people from different organisations that champion race equality and you know, do as much as they can within their sectors to promote anti-racism. But you know, we need to capture a diverse voice in this as well.
Right. Let's talk about more about Professor Kevin Hilton. As you mentioned, he's written about 9 reports, and he's an expert, especially in football. He's written about the Race Equality Commission in football, or why racism matters in football. So in terms of his expertise or the decision to choose him, how did you come to that? Did you just look at it because of his expertise, or were there so many people involved? But then how did you come up to the decision?
Okay, so we spoke to a number of different individuals. He was probably the most senior in terms of being a professor. And all of the individuals that we spoke to had some degree of understanding, well, some level of depth of understanding of race equality. I think his depth of understanding was the strongest. And he came across as an individual who understood the nuances as well, and being able to deal with different things that communities may put forward, and also being able to deal with institutions as well. So I think even though his specialism has been in sports and culture, if you read the number of different journals that he's done, some are not in sports and culture. And I know that he has also done some areas of education as well, and some in relation to early years as well. So on speaking to him, he was the one that captured the strongest understanding of what we wanted to do in Sheffield, and a potential way forward.
Okay. You've got business and employment as thematic areas, civic life and communities, crime and justice, education, health, sport and culture. So those are the areas of, I'm trying to speak now to our viewers who might be interested in applying to be commissioner, part of the commissioners panel. Are those the specific strengths you're looking for from people, or do you just want generalist?
I mean, it's any area. Anybody that's really interested in race equality looks at those themes and think, okay, these are really interesting themes, and perhaps in my work, in whatever I do, you know, I do something that links into this, or I've got experience in doing work in terms of race equity, then, you know, we'd encourage them to apply. But if they don't want to apply and they have had experience themselves of racism within those different themes, to give evidence in those particular themes, then they can as well. And those themes allow for discussions in sports or education or business, and communities should be encouraged as well to share their experiences. So some individuals might not want to be commissioners, but they might want to talk about their experiences instead.
Okay, that's quite clear. Thank you. Like I mentioned, we talked about the fact that we're starting off from a point where we acknowledge that there are disparities. This is real life. We're not rehearsing at life. We are experiencing these racial disparities within Sheffield. Is there an expectation already on your part of what you expect to see in the outcome, in the findings?
I think everybody will have some expectations. I think, you know, when we go into this, everybody that I've spoken to and individuals that I've spoken to feel that, you know, that there are things that we know can be done, but we're just unsure as to why they've not been looked at before. So, you know, it's that I don't want to sort of say specifically what I think can be done across all the different themes. I think in terms of education, I can be probably quite explicit. I think I know what should be done there. And because we've already had the discussions within schools and representatives that...
What are you expecting in education then?
In education, I would say that the curriculum needs to be addressed. We're already starting to get individuals to discuss those different themes, and I think the Commission can be explicit in saying what particular things in the curriculum could be addressed. I think diversity in the workforce is a big thing, and, you know, from listening to many teachers who come from a BEMA background, they've said that actually progression in education is difficult as well, that it's difficult to work up to becoming assistant head or deputy head or even head teacher. And so that needs to be looked at as well. And then the achievement gap, and then there'll be the experiences of students. So the achievement gap of students, but also how do we address disproportionate rates of exclusion in Sheffield as well within different communities.
This has come as a result of the killing of George Floyd in America, as you mentioned there. But it has also come at a time that is very, very difficult for all the communities here involved. It has come at a very unprecedented time. So in terms of right now, the way we are living, things are not as the way it used to be. So looking at that and the difficulties or the challenges right now that families or communities are going through, how are you going to make sure that this works out perfectly? Because looking at it right now, things are not the way it used to be. A lot has changed, and a lot is still going to change as we are kind of hearing maybe a second wave of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the way in which we do this will be reflective of the current working practices that we have. I think going forward, we've received advice that the initial meetings of the Commission will be virtual until next year, until it's safe for people to meet together as a fixed meeting. But we also recognise that actually this whole experience has disproportionately impacted on BME communities as well. And, you know, in relation to health, that the number of people that have caught the virus and have passed away have come from Black and ethnic minority communities. So that is actually something that we need to learn from as well. And I think, and nationally, we know that there are different studies looking into this. but it's not something that we should shy away from in Sheffield as well, to look at the specific numbers that we've had in the city and what our institutions, our primary care trust, our CCGs, our hospitals are doing to ensure that they can address the points in relation to specific communities as well. So yes, we are working in different ways now, and I think that'll be reflective of the working practice of the Commission going forward.
Are you surprised the way things are going right now, especially in terms of, like, just as you've mentioned, the Black and ethnic minority communities have been kind of like affected the most in terms of health, or kind of like COVID-19, and in terms of the response as well given to ethnic minorities? Looking at my point here is, at the beginning of the pandemic, the way the council or the response was set up, if I'm allowed to say it, I will say more Black and ethnic minority communities, I wouldn't use the word ignored, but we are kind of like put aside for a time until they had to like stand up for themselves and say, look, we are here and we need to be acknowledged as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not any different to how things have happened in the past, if I'm being honest. You know, I initially, when the death toll started, I was surprised to see the number of Black and ethnic minority people that were dying as a result of COVID. And I think nationally we started to see the pictures that were shown on the news, and the national picture started to raise a lot of concern. So I think when I saw that there was vulnerability within groups, it made me more cautious, especially about my family members as well, thinking, okay, well, we need to be more careful with perhaps our mother, our fathers, and extended family members as well, to ensure that they wouldn't be put at additional risk. And you know, and I think it was probably midway into the pandemic, so around May, June, when the level of sort of discussion and interest that this had nationally, I think, started to relay locally as well. So I think it did come as an initial surprise to me that more people were affected by it. But then as we started to listen to the reasons why, I'm not entirely convinced that it's all down to disproportionate sort of having underlying health conditions. I think there are a number of different factors there, and I think we need that more work needs to go into investigating why BME communities were affected more, because, you know, there were some healthy individuals that were affected, and it wasn't always about having, you know, high blood pressure or diabetes and all the different other things that perhaps BME communities have more of. So, you know, I think there's a lot more work that needs to go in there. I think in terms of the second part of the question and BME communities and what they've done, I think there's, you know, I've been impressed by the voluntary sector in Sheffield. The wider voluntary sector, if I'm being honest, I think the whole of the voluntary sector has really stepped up to delivering communities. And I think the BME voluntary sector has also done some excellent work in terms of reaching out to community groups. And I think what this has shown to me is the importance of how the voluntary sector has very, very strong ties in communities, and whether that's, and I think when I say voluntary sector, I specifically mean the smaller ones, the smaller organisations that are based in the heart of their communities, not the bigger infrastructure organisations that perhaps don't know who local people are and would ask the smaller organisations to do all the delivery for them. So, you know, I think a lot of the small organisations need to be commended for the work that they've done, but also supported going forward. Because if anything, this whole experience has shown us, in a time of emergency, when we need people to reach out in their local communities, it was the ones who work and have lived and supported in their local communities for many, many years were the ones who were most reliable, and they were the ones that actually got us through a lot of the sort of the food bank issues, the delivery of food, the use of volunteers. It was them that did this, not the big institutions that struggled, who didn't know who to turn to. So, you know, that needs to be recognised going forward.
Thanks a lot. I'm really glad that you've both tackled this issue, and especially about how the mobilization from within our communities, as a Black woman, Asian woman, the mobilization there has been commendable, highly commendable. Suffice to say too that mutual aid is not something strange or alien to our communities. This has existed, except it's been given this uplifted image now because everybody else is starting to see it, to acknowledge it. Part of the problem, and I'll be winding down soon because we're getting to that point, but part of the problem as well with the response was not just on the voluntary sector. And Councillor Abtisam, I'd like to bring you back in this because the council as well was pointed at as having been a very slow player, and that's what brought the community to rise up and step up into this. The Race Equality Commission that you're currently working on, the Secretariat is at Sheffield City Council. Do you foresee any barriers, hindrances into progression of this, not just within your role as a councillor, but just the fact that this is sitting Secretariat-wise in the council?
Okay, so is the question in relation to how I see the council engaging with this and being critical of the council as well?
Absolutely, both ways. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So in relation to how the commission will go forward, I don't see the council as being separate to any of the other organisations. I think the council and its structure is a big organisation, and it should be seen as the same as every other organisation in Sheffield in terms of scrutiny and how we look at things going forward. And things aren't perfect, you know, things need to be improved. And you know, and I've been I think open and honest with individuals within the council who've asked me this question, that you know, it pains me to see individuals from Black and ethnic minority communities that have worked in the council for 20-30 years and have been at the same position for 20-30 years, and the lack of diversity that we have, the further up the chain you go, is unacceptable. And I think things like this need to be addressed, and I don't think we should step aside and say that the council is not going to face that kind of scrutiny. I think it needs to, and I think it needs to for the sake of its communities, because the council is there to represent all of its communities in Sheffield. So no, I don't see that the council should be separate to this. And I think even though the secretariat is being provided by the council, I have made clear from the start that a lot of the difficult questions will be for the council as well as an employer. So as an employer, how do they ensure progression? As an organisation that subcontracts, how do they reflect on the subcontractees that they work with and the diversity of the organisations that they work with? You know, so there's a lot of things that I think need to be looked into from within the council as well, as much as all the other organisations that we look into. So I don't see that the council would be exclusive and wouldn't face that level of scrutiny.
Thank you.
We've got less than about 5 minutes to go. I just wanted to know as well, yourself personally, how will you like to be remembered in this role in terms of at the end of this inquiry, or you as a councillor in the future?
I don't know, actually. I'm not sure if I felt like throwing the towel in many times in the last 6 months. So I'm not sure I can think beyond 6 months at the moment. So this isn't about me, Elio. This is much bigger. I'm not going to be a commissioner, for the very reason that, you know, I don't think it is about me. It's about individuals who have an interest in wanting to change things, pushing that forward. You know, I've as I've said before, I've worked in the sector for a long time, and if I can use my position to help communities, if I can use my position to address race equality, then it would be shameful of me not to do something in the position that I have. So whilst I'm a cabinet member, I intend to ensure that we do everything that we can to address race inequality. And if that's something that I'm remembered for, then that's for communities to remember you for. I don't think it's ever for the individual, for me, to tell people how they want to remember me. Some people might remember me as a dragon, so I don't think that's a good thing to relate to people. But, you know, I've got another 2 years left in my term. And I'll think at that point whether I want to restand again as a councillor as well. So I've been having my own thoughts and discussions about whether I do intend to restand as a councillor, but that's not for now. That's for a couple of years' time.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Abtisam. That's really hard to hear. Bilo, I'm having to wind down in a bit. Abtisam, So thank you so much for speaking to our viewers, and a lot will definitely be interested, I imagine, in participating in the inquiry, making submissions. Is it the Race Equality Commission at sheffield.gov? Could you just give us the contact details of how best people can submit to the inquiry?
Yeah, so so it's on the council website. There's a designated page for the Race Equality Commission. So if you go onto the council website and just put in the search engine Race Equality, it should bring up the designated page.
Okay, yep, lovely, thank you. Okay, Bilo, do you have one last question before I wind this down?
Well, sure. Just a final one from me, as Chiwe have said there. In generally, overall, the inquiry, and with your role as a solicitor and as a councillor, how are you finding, if there are challenges, or how are you finding like blending those jobs right now?
Very difficult, very, very difficult. I think the advantage for the commission and for the council is that actually my legal work I can do alongside everything else. And I think the fact that I come from a legal background helps me to formulate things, scrutinize and understand the different things that need to be done. So I think the background, the professional background that I have helps with the development of the commission. And in terms of the logistics of working and managing all the different things, I think the fact that we're doing everything by Zoom is really, really helping me. Otherwise, I don't think I'd be able to cope.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thanks so much again, Abtisam. As somebody who, with the Fairness Commission, I co-authored the paper that was submitted by the refugee sector. I used to work in the refugee sector then, and I did feel like it didn't go further than just the inquiry. So I'm glad to hear that there's an accountability system that's being put into place with this particular commission of inquiry. So thank you so much for speaking to our viewers on Sheffield Live and African Voices TV, and we look forward to having you back to tell us what progress has been made in the coming 6 months.
Thank you ever so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.